Right in the heart of Holladay City, Utah stands SwimKids Utah's first permanent location. Since 1983, the founder Liz Walker has taught thousands of kids to swim, all starting with 3 kids in a trailer park pool. Today, I'm talking to Liz about growing SwimKids from those humble beginnings all the way to teaching over 50,000 Utah families, saving children's lives in the process, and of course, how she became a Utahpreneur.
There are kids who drown in the bathtub, fall in the toilet. I mean, it's just like it was a real need. When you take a child from, I can't swim, I'm scared, I'm climbing up on your head, to watch me, I can do it, it's very rewarding. So back in the day, you would like take your television and go to the fair and set it up and show a video. The growth was really, really insane. Went from 3 kids the first week to 6 kids, and then I had to say, no, this is supposed to be quote unquote a hobby, something that I enjoy doing, but not that burns me out completely.
Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
Mom. Very fun to have you as the first official episode of this podcast. The life that I grew up with, having you as the owner, CEO, customer service specialist, and swim teacher of SwimKids, definitely inspired a lot of the idea and the motivation behind this podcast. So I'm excited to kind of have this come full circle with you being the first episode. So SwimKids started out as a trailer park pool operation.
Yeah.
And is now grown to teach over 50,000 Utah families, 3 permanent locations. You've taught out of dozens of satellite pools, and even saved some lives along the way.
Absolutely.
And did you ever think it would end up here when you started?
Probably not. You know, I was into the one lesson at a time, one day at a time, teaching swimming and raising kids along the way. So yeah. I don't think I saw the big picture. That my kids helped me see that. Yeah.
It's really cool to see this location that we're in right now, heart of Holladay City. Before Holladay downtown became a thing, the real estate's just in such a great location, and it's been so cool to see SwimKids become a staple of the community. So I want to talk about how you got here, but let's start at the very beginning. How did you get the idea for SwimKids?
Well, I studied child development and behavioral psychology in college, and I really loved watching children learn. And when my youngest daughter was born and she started being like a toddler age, I was concerned about her with regards to swimming, because I had had some very compromising situations as a child, and I survived, but my parents just said, keep your life jacket on. And so I wondered what I could do for her. So I took her to the community pool in a parent talk class, and she was crawling. And the first couple classes, I asked the teacher, well, when are we going to put them under the water? And she said, well, we don't do that. We just play in the water. And so then we went to a class, and I was visiting with the moms, waiting for the class to start, and my daughter was getting kind of excited to be moving around. So I set her down on the ground, and she crawled directly to the pool. And that day I was just thinking, she thinks this water is a playground. She can't wait to go in, and she has no skills to help her. So at that point, I started researching more, reading books, looking at possible other programs, writing curriculum myself, borrowing kids from friends and family. So that's how we got the 3 kids in the trailer park pool. We were living in the trailer park at the time. So one of the courses that really stood out to me was individualized for the child. So you worked one-on-one with the kids, and you taught them skills where they could save themselves if they were to fall in. If they ended up face down, they could rotate to their back and float. And so I took the course, and my husband and I moved to go to school for graduate school for him, and he needed a job, and there were not enough jobs in the summer for college students where we were. So he also trained and started teaching. And so we went from our trailer park. We were trying to get more students, and so we went around and asked. We needed dental work, we needed eyeglasses. There were a lot of things we needed as poor college students, and so we asked people in the community if they would be willing to trade swimming lessons for things that we needed, and they were very excited about it. And one family, when they realized that lessons were going to end in August because we didn't have an indoor pool, they offered their indoor pool, which was huge for us. I was teaching at the university at the time, and my husband was in college, and so our second child was coming, and I started getting more people interested in lessons that were not summer lessons. So I decided at the end of that time frame that I would stop working at the university and just keep going with the swimming. And so it just kept growing. And of course, just having the two of us was not enough as it continued to grow, because the kids were really learning to swim. It wasn't just playtime.
So the first 3 trial kids in the trailer park pool, how did you start to get your first paying clients, and what were you charging at the time? How long were the lessons? And what were you learning in those early days about what was working and what wasn't? Because you sort of, if I understand correctly, you combined what you learned in the course, but also in your child development background and the degree that you got at Utah State, and kind of blended those to make your own curriculum, right?
Right. So back in the day, the way that you found clients, you would take your television and go to the fair and set it up and show a video. And then my husband was in economics, and he said, well, we should have a little thing at the trailer park. At the trailer park, we should just invite people who might be interested. And we had 10 people come and 7 people signed up. And I was just devastated. I was just like, how can we make this work? And he said, a 70% close rate? You don't get it. But then we got these people interested. And then it was very interesting in those first days, because we only had one car, and one of the ladies that was really interested in the program, I said I would give her a discount on lessons if she would give me a ride to the pool. So
Nice.
She would drive me up there, and I would teach her boys, and then I would continue teaching. And then I had another neighbor who would have the last lesson, and they would give me a ride home.
So you're teaching out of this indoor pool that one of your students volunteered, basically, and this is in Provo, right?
Yes.
Did it get to a point where you outgrew that indoor pool, and what happened next?
Well, what happened is then my husband graduated, and we left the area. We moved to California, and initially thought we could do the program there, but they have a lot of regulations in California, so it was very short-lived. And before we left, I had one of the ladies who was taking lessons, bringing her kids to me. I'd basically given her my business.
Oh, wow.
I mean, she was giving me $5 a student when they signed up, but anyway, so I gave her the lessons, and instead of moving back to the Provo area, we moved to Salt Lake. And so once again, I started again with 3 kids, but I was at an indoor, I was at the sports mall, and they had a pool bubble, and so I could teach all the time. And then at this point, I went from 3 kids the first week to 6 kids to, it just kept growing. And then I had to say, no, I can't. I have 3 children of my own. This is supposed to be, quote unquote, a hobby, something that I enjoy doing, but not that burns me out completely. So I limited the number of kids. I taught 10-minute lessons. I taught 5 students an hour, and I limited it to 18 lessons per day that I taught. And I also refused to teach 5 days a week, whereas some of the instructors, well, you have to teach 5 days a week or the kids won't learn. I had people come to me who said, I'm only off on Monday. Can I just do it on Monday? And I'm like, well, why not? So we tried the kids who could only come once a week, and sometimes they would be my first lesson and my last lesson of the day, so they got 2 lessons. But I started toying with the idea of fewer days a week and less pressure on the parents, where you have to sign up for, 16 lessons or you can't come take lessons.
So the move to California wasn't really for the business. It was for...
Well, my husband did have a job there, but the Whittier quake happened right as we got there, and the earthquake, and the job didn't work out. And he had actually looked into, he was down there before the kids and I, and so he had actually looked into opportunities down there, but it was really a hard market to get into. Plus, I think there were lots of, swim instructors in Utah. People just aren't even thinking about swimming. But there are kids who drown in the bathtub. There, kids who fall in the toilet. I mean, it's just like it was a real need, and there wasn't much here in Utah. So
I see. So it was a combination of the job not working out for your husband, but also the market was much more open in Utah. There was less competition.
Right.
Okay, so you're in the sports mall. It's just you. Your husband's been helping you out for the summers previously. Is he continue to do that in the summers? Because now he's got a job,
he's
right?
full-time and he's traveling with his job. So I just had to really limit it for a lot of years. And then when my oldest daughter turned 12, she started coming to the pool with me, and I would get the kids swim float swimming, and I was working with 6 months to maybe up to 3. And then the parents were like, well, could she work with my child a little longer? Or can, I put my 6-year-old in with her? And so every day back and forth to the pool, we would talk about what she was doing and what I was doing and how she could, I don't know, I had like eyes in the back of my head, because I would say, well, you were working with this boy and this happened. This is what I would suggest. And she was mentored on the way to the pool and back, and then grandma got involved. My daughter was a cheerleader, so she'd go to practice at 5:30 in the morning, then she'd get dropped off at the pool at 9, get in the pool, teach with me till 1, and she was mentored along the way. And then my next child came along, same kind of thing.
Okay.
I remember he wanted to learn, and I needed some students that were willing to let him work with them. And there was a mom with 5 kids, and I just gave her a screaming deal, and it was an awesome to watch both sides. Him learning the skill and these kids getting safe in the water because of that. And at that point, trying to think when, so we started teaching at this location. I want to say it was the Olympics for that 2002. And what they would do, this pool was owned by the dive shop, and they would kick us out every summer and do their own swim program. And none of our parents wanted us to stop teaching. So we ended up at one point with 10 outdoor locations, and that helped us expand to different areas. And then also, I do remember just the day when my brother-in-law, he was a CPA, and he said, you're moving into a whole new world because you are going to have your first real employee that's not family. And so, we started having real employees, and it expanded from that. So then, let's see, in 2000, I want to say it was 2009 or 10, when the market wasn't good for, like, the banks were having issues, my oldest son approached the owners of this facility and said, hey, would you sell to us? And they were hesitant for a while, but they liked the idea of us taking over all the responsibilities and them still being able to rent from us during the evening hours when we weren't teaching. And so that, once we owned our own water, then that really, it caused a lot of pros and cons. We had to have students for our employees, and we had to do all the stuff to cover insurance and mortgage and everything like that. So that pushed us into a whole new world. But it was really great, because when we first taught here, the owners would let anybody they wanted teach swimming here. And so they would be passing out flyers to our clients saying swim for less. And we're like, wait a minute, this isn't working, or our equipment would disappear or things like that. So yeah, it was big and overwhelming, but at the same time, the growth allowed us to move from this location to another indoor year-round in Pleasant Grove, and then another year-round indoor in Layton.
So I want to, like, that period of hypergrowth, I want to revisit that, but I want to examine, like, what was the motivation from your oldest daughter's, 5 or 6, when you came back to Utah?
Yeah, she was kindergarten.
Yeah. So all those years of teaching, was it, I just love this, we need the extra money, I need something to do while my kids are at school? Or what was the motivation of teaching during those years when it was just you had young kids, you had, I mean, maybe not during that time, but yeah, you had a couple more kids during that time to bring it up to 5 total. What was your motivation during that time?
Well, my number one motivation was having my own kids learn to swim. And so that was really great, because I would work it out where whoever was helping me would bring my kids at the end of when I was teaching, and they would have lessons. And it gave me access to these pools that I didn't have I didn't have a membership at the sports mall or things like that. So having them learn to swim was number one. It is such when you take a child from I can't swim, I'm scared, I'm climbing up on your head, to watch me, I can do it. It's very rewarding. It was great exercise. It was a great outlet, as long as I controlled how long that I went. And that part was really hard, because when people would be on my wait list and they would feel like, it's taking too long. That's why it was so nice when Kirsten started teaching, and then Lance. But
that's the oldest 2 kids.
It was challenging.
And how was it growing? How did you have the wait list? Was it just word of mouth?
It was so funny, because someone approached me about putting an ad in the Yellow Pages, and I was like, I can't afford that. Why would I want the Yellow Pages? And so it was just so-and-so told me about you, so-and-so told me about you, or they would be at the pool. There was a lady that came up. This was a really hard situation, but so I had a child in the water, and I was teaching them, a 2-year-old boy, and this mom comes up to the child's mother and says, "What are you doing? You're making him afraid of the water. Look, he's crying." And the lady looked over and she said, "Well, I had a son that would be turning 4, and he drowned, and the crying has never ended." And I mean, I'm trying to hold it together in the pool. And that mom watched for another week or 2, and then she enrolled. And so if people saw us, because we were in a public, well, not public, it was private, but other people were using the pool. And then it was just word of mouth. Yeah.
And what was the difference in the approach from the other teachers at that time, or the other options that people had? Like, why would they choose you over someone else, other than the location or the convenience?
They learned to swim in weeks, not years. I mean, a lot of them, they would say, "Well, my child's had 4 years of lessons. Do you think, this year they'll learn to swim?" And I said, well, part of it depends on you, because if you're a parent who never lets the teacher put the child under the water, then no, I don't think they're going to. But it's a situation where I have the skills. I will take it as the child can accept it. One-on-one lessons are the way to go. I don't even know if they had much in the way of one-on-one lessons back in the early stages of our lessons.
Okay. So you were one-on-one, you were actually teaching them versus, just playing around in the water.
Right.
Talk to us about how the curriculum has evolved over time, because I know that the original course you took was quite aggressive in terms of how young they would try to teach kids, and how the methods that they use to get them to learn.
Right.
And that didn't sit right with you, if I'm right.
Right.
So tell us about what's the difference between the SwimKids curriculum and maybe rec center lessons on the one end, and survival swimming lessons on the other.
So, start with rec center lessons. You may have 4 kids in a class. They're sitting on the steps. The teacher takes them one at a time and kicks around the pool and brings them back. She's trying to lifeguard the other 3 kids. If you've got an aggressive kid, he may be under the water when she's got her back turned. I've taught numerous kids who've been in private lesson or group lessons, and the parents said, I was sitting in the bleachers and then I saw my kid was under the water. Some of them even would put kind of like a table in the pool to make it less, so it was shallow enough for the kids to stand up, and then they would just step off the thing, be under the water, and no one's watching. And it is, drowning is very fast. It happens within minutes. So group lessons, you've got just the personalities. You could have 4 3-year-olds, but one of them wants to jump off the diving board and the other one is scared to put their toe in the water. So they're not likely going to learn in that kind of a setting. Yeah. Private lessons, there are some that are really, really aggressive with the survival, where they just take the child. People will come to me and say, are you going to drop them off the diving board on the first lesson? And I'm like, no, we're going to teach breath control, float position, body positioning to move through the water. So it's all done in steps. And the thing that was the hardest to do is to get a new employee up to speed in a financially makes sense. I can't be teaching you for a year before, if I'm paying you all that time and you're not bringing any money into the company, then that doesn't work. So I had to really hone in on what am I doing and how am I doing this and how can I say it in a such a simplified way that I can pass it to you and you could take a child and know what to do next. So that part was really challenging, but that's how the curriculum has evolved. And then the one section that we decided, for example, I was out at one of our satellite locations this summer, and this mom approached me and she said, you taught my 20-year-old when he was 9 months old. I have a 1.5-year-old, and I took him to another survival program and all they did was scare him. Can you help me? And she had her other 3 kids in lessons with us at our pool. And so we had started what was called parent talk class, where you come in with a few other parents. So let's say you've got 4 kids in the water, 6 months to a year and a half with their parent, and it's 25-minute class. And we're working on breath control, floating, movement through the water, but the child has the comfort of the parent in the water. And that's one of the transfers we made when I quit teaching all the little lessons. We just said, if they're under 2, they start with the parent taught, and then once they're showing signs of passing off well to another adult, then we can put them in private lessons. And it also depends on the personality of the child and the parenting style. Because I've had parents say, well, I have a 4-month-old, I want you to teach him to be safe in a riptide. And then I've had other parents who are really coddling their 5-year-old. Like, do you really want to go in the water? Are you sure you want to do this? It kind of, it's definitely has a lot to do with parenting style.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is teach the student, not the lesson. Like, it's about the individual progression of where that child is at, where their parents are at.
Right.
And they're going to be better off going a little bit slower so that they don't get traumatized by, for those that don't know, they'll do like a swim test for these, 15, 16 months old, where they'll throw them in the pool and they have to learn to roll on their back. And I, as a previous employee of SwimKids, have taught kids that are completely traumatized from that process, even 6-7 years later, and can't put their face in the water, right? So if someone's struggling with that, let's say there's a parent listening to this that wants their kid to learn but doesn't want to be too aggressive, you would say the SwimKids approach maybe is the right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is communication, and like I teach my teachers, it's a ladder, and you've got 1 foot in confidence, 1 foot in skill. So if I have a little 3-year-old who runs in and I want to go off the diving board, I know that his confidence is, way up here and his skill is way down here, and I've got to balance it so as he's climbing the ladder, he's getting the skills that he needs in a safe way. And then, like I say, the parenting part, the parenting style, communicating with the parent. Are you comfortable with what we're doing? How is he acting outside of lessons? That type of thing.
I see. And is there a world where survival lessons are right for a 15-month-old kid?
Well, it's really a challenging situation because you are hoping that your child will never be the one who sneaks through the doggy door and you find them in the pool and they don't survive. Or you have a lake home, or grandma and grandpa have a pool. I mean, it's just one of those things that you as a parent have to figure out how to balance. I feel like what you do is you start them young and you are consistent in continuing to teach breath control, movement through the water, floating, so that they never have to get traumatized over doing it.
But all the while teaching a healthy respect for what the water can do to you.
Yeah.
Because the statistics are that the pool is more dangerous for a kid than a firearm, right?
It's the number one cause of accidental death for children under 4, if I understand correctly.
Wow.
So,
have you had any stories of parents coming back to you saying the lessons at SwimKids saved my life, saved my child's life, and what was the circumstance under which that child was able to be saved or save themselves?
In the beginning days when people had direct access to me, I would have 2 or 3 every season where they would call and say, my child's alive today because they took your course, and thank you so much. And one particular case, it was just this darling little 2-year-old boy who was very doted over by the parents and the grandparents. He was an only child, and I just remember like a drove of people coming in to watch him take his lesson, and they would just be so excited about little improvements. And also back in the day, we taught swim, float, swim, and then we would put them in clothing a little bit at a time so that if they fell in with their clothes on, they knew how to turn over and float and balance them, stay on their back and float with their clothes on, because 68% of the kids who drown are not planning to go swimming. They're not in a swimming suit. So in this particular case, this little guy, the family they had a wedding, and it was at a private home, and there was a pond in the yard, and he's in his little tux and he's running around. He's, everyone's watching him, but no one's watching him. He's in between people's legs. He's in somebody's arms. He gets put down. He's all around. And when they notice him, he's floating on his back in his little tux, safely floating in the pond, alive. And that was just one of those amazing situations. There was another one where the father took he was probably 3.5, took him fishing, and they were sitting on a bridge. And of course the father saw the whole thing, but he was very grateful that the child responded correctly. So they're sitting on this bridge fishing, and the little boy kind of just shifted his body, and he fell off the bridge into the river. And so his dad rushed down to get him, and he was wearing a coat and everything, and he got on his back and floated. And then when his dad got to him and got him out, he said, "I couldn't find the wall." But he as far as his dad told me, he was not afraid. He was just more annoyed that he couldn't find the wall.
For those that don't know, the wall is a big thing at SwimKids, where they're constantly taught to flip over and find the wall. When you're doing a swim test with them, one of my least favorite things to do as an instructor, but necessary, you kind of sit them up on the wall and then throw them into the water sideways or push them into the water sideways, and they have to roll on their back and then find the wall. So very cute that he remembered that from lessons. Okay, so going back to the kind of meteoric rise of SwimKids during the early 2000s, let's say, who was your first employee, and how did you know it was time to hire them?
My daughter was leaving, and she was going to be gone for 18 months, and she's like, you got to have somebody to take my place. I know this friend of mine from high school, and he was on the swim team and things like that. So he was the first hire.
Okay.
And then at that point, it was funny because people would come and knock on our door and say, could I get a job at SwimKids? We were paying him $5 a lesson, and I guess that was big money back then.
And that was here at Dive Utah back in the day.
Yeah, I'm guessing we had to have been here by now. Sometimes I lose track of time, but yeah.
Where were you at? Like, was it a big jump to say, all right, we're going to take on all this real estate, we're going to take on the mortgage and the burden of actually managing the facility ourselves? With the revenue you had at the time, did it feel scary, and were you ready for that jump, or did it feel very comfortable?
It definitely seemed overwhelming. I had to focus on the fact that I wasn't going to have to deal with other teachers in the pool, that I would have control of the water. And it was like my son and my husband said, you either have to go big or go home. You're going to get eaten alive. And they also realized that when my son got involved and started helping at this location, I think he hired 4 people to take my position because I was doing too much. And before we moved into the building, we had an office at our home, and so I could get up at 11, midnight and work for 3 hours and then go back to bed and, this kind of thing. And it was not good for my mental or physical health. And thank heavens my family realized that, in particular my oldest son, and said, hey, we want Grandma to be around. What can we do to help you? And it was really, really hard for both of us. Because I'd never turned it over to anyone else. And I did take a 90-day sabbatical, and they would call and say, well, who turns off the sprinklers, or how do you do this thing, or where do we get this rental? What about the snow removal? And, there was a lot of those things that were in my head, and they were smart enough to get it down on paper and make it into a streamlined process.
Wow. And that would have been what, 2016, 2017?
Yeah, around there, because my husband left his corporate job in 2010, and he said he's coming to work for me. And I'm like, you're coming to work for me? You've never let me tell you what to do. How's that going to work? But it was like he dealt with the real estate and kind of like land things, and I dealt with curriculum and water things. And so that worked out, and he has a lot of talent that I don't have. So
okay. But as far as Lance taking over, who's the oldest son, I think I remember that being around 2016, and you saying it's almost like a drug for entrepreneurs, like they're addicted to the chaos sometimes. Like, I know how to manage this, I'm the only one that can do it. And so being forced out of that, you were saying your emotions were so raw.
Yep.
So much blood, sweat, and tears put into this business over the last, 20?
It was my 6th child.
Yeah.
How was I going to give up my 6th child?
Yeah. So since then, how have you been able to balance the, retirement that you're slowly working into, I would say, and still wanting to see your 6th child succeed and live up to its potential?
Well, I feel like having my daughter involved. She got a master's in tax, so she's a CPA, and we have a weekly meeting to go over numbers and how things are. And she's very dedicated to the program, so that's been really good. And
nothing like having someone that's worked for you for 25 years take over. Most small businesses, unless it's their child, they don't have someone like that.
And then, I think I'm up to 14 grandkids, and so that's been awesome to just be able to go. I'm busy. I've got grandkids, and I remember a few years ago when I had the 3-year-old, and she wasn't quite, jumping off the board independently swimming. But we would just make a date and go here and go there. And they would say, don't you want to teach a fast track? Don't you want to be here 4 days a week? And I'm like, no. Well, how about 2 days a week? No, I don't think so. And because the curriculum changed a little bit, I love 2 and 3 year olds, new beginners. And when they would first give me sessions to teach, kids at level 8 could get on my schedule, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with an level 8 child. I don't come from a lifeguard or that kind of swim background.
Level 8 is strokes and things like that.
The stroke stuff. So I love working with the new beginners, and that's great. So I don't know if that makes sense. But
nice.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest part of running SwimKids over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years? What's the most challenging business problem you've run into?
The growth was really, really insane, just trying to keep up with the growth. We never had enough employees. We had difficulty keeping, like we would train someone really well and then they would leave and do their own thing, and that was really, really hard. And then just the last few years, franchises have started coming in that we never expected. So it probably happened 2019, 20, and you go into these franchises and you're like, what are you doing? You've got a floaty on the kids and they're all sitting on the side waiting their turn. This is not swimming lessons, but they have ability to market to. And so let's say you're new in the area and you just Google swimming lessons and, I've got a place 5 minutes from here, and it looks pristine. Our place is, we took over an existing building and we've done the best we could, but there are lots of things that make another facility inviting to people. It's close to their home. They're not paying attention to whether the kids are learning to swim or not.
I see. Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen is just the education of the parents. Like, hey, this isn't baseball or soccer. This is a life-changing skill, and it may be fun for you to go walk or take your child to a group lesson and just kind of watch them, but really challenging the parents to understand what this is all about is something that I've seen SwimKids try to do over time, and it's hard to get people to listen. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Well, and the fact that the majority of other lessons are 30 minutes and they're thinking, why am I driving to a 10 or 15-minute lesson? I mean, I taught over 20 years. I taught 10-minute lessons. We do 15-minute lessons now. That extra time, that was actually one of the ways I got people to move off my schedule and go to some of the people that I employed, because I'm like, you're going to get that much more lesson time, and then it also gives a little bit more balance with the play time and the skill work.
So why are the lessons so short?
Because they're individualized for each child. And I mean, if you got in and swam for 30 minutes at 3/4 effort, you would be exhausted. And these kids are swimming hard. They're not sitting waiting their turn. You'd have to go in and like take a, watch your watch and see how much time your child actually gets in a group class. But in these lessons, it's their one-on-one, and we're working. If this child needs to learn to float, we're going to work on floating. Not necessarily for 15 minutes, but we're going to keep coming back to floating because that's the target skill that they need to get the next level of safety. If it's mouth closure, if it's movement through the water, our curriculum is a circuit. We teach circuit, but we focus on the target behavior as much as the child will allow.
What's the farthest you've ever had someone travel for your lessons?
Meadow, Utah. So Meadow, Utah, there was
a Holladay.
I don't even know. I didn't even know where it was, but it's like on the way to St. George.
Yeah, Meadow Hot Springs. It's about halfway from Salt Lake to St. George.
So this particular family, their child fell in and nearly drowned, and then she found us. And so what they would do is they'd come up and stay in a hotel for several days in a row and have like a first lesson in the morning and then another one in the afternoon. We've also had people from out of state, like they have families, they come during the summer, Or there was a lady from Texas who contacted me, and she was very pregnant, and her 5-year-old's like, Charlie's on the bottom of the pool, Mom. She turns around and, her 2-year-old is down on the bottom and she's trying to pull him up and being very pregnant. And so she looked up lessons. She found us, came here on spring break, and they took each child took 3 lessons a day for the week they were here.
Wow.
They got a lot of skills.
Wow. I think something that's on a lot of other Utah entrepreneurs' mind right now is staffing and keeping employees for a long time. Like, the most expensive thing for a business right now is employee turnover. What tips do you have for somebody that's struggling with that and maybe hiring a similar type of employee as you?
Well, I got a book. I think it was 1,000 Ways to Have Success with Employees or something like that. And it has a lot of little things. I mean, being able to, on a regular basis, acknowledge all that they do for your company and be able to help them with work-life balance. That's been huge. We've had moms who, have different situations with their kids where all of a sudden they need time off, and we're just like, we're not going to hold that against you. Your child has to have surgery. And so trying to help SwimKids be a place of where they feel satisfied in their work and that we understand that they have life outside of work.
For anyone that's considering swim lessons in Utah, but they don't know where to take their kids, what would you tell them?
Well, I think initially you need to ask yourself, why do I want my child to take swimming lessons? And that, if it's a safety need, I mean, a lot of the people who come to us, they've had a situation in their family. It could be extended family or whatever, where all of a sudden they realize, wow, this is so important. So you've got to decide, because there's so many different kinds of swimming lessons. There are play lessons, there's work lessons, and so you have to figure out your goals and then decide whether you can commit to the time that it takes to get your child independent in the water, or if rec lessons are fine for you, you feel like you can check it off, like, oh, my child took 2 weeks of swimming lessons in the summer, so I'm a good parent. So it depends on your goals.
And any final words to a fellow Utah entrepreneur who is struggling, or maybe somewhere in that messy middle that you were in for so long? What advice would you give to someone who's wanting to grow their business but doesn't know what the next step is?
I think for me, I wasn't focused on the big picture. So I think if they think they have something where they want to grow their business, they need to get into a group of people that will help open their mind. I was part of 10,000 small businesses. Is that 10? It's bigger than that. Yeah. Anyway, groups of people that can get your mind wrapped around a larger idea if you want to grow it, because it's got to make sense for you. Like when I was a young mom, it did not make sense for me to miss out on my kids' lives. So it's got to be the right timing too.
Yeah. And what did the 10,000 small businesses, that's from, forget the name of the investment bank.
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs, yeah. What did that unlock for you?
Well, when I got to hear the stories of a lot of different people and how they got to where they were, even they just had kind of a funny little idea that you would go, blankets, baby blankets that you mail all over the place. Or I think the lady, it was something to do with like the chicken soup that people wanted to have delivered to their house when they were sick. It wasn't that specific lady, but something similar to that. And I'm like, how could that grow into that big of a business? But in that program, they taught us, well, they showed it, they said, the businesses that are going to be big 10 years from now don't exist right now. And that was shocking to me. And then they would give us these envelopes and they'd say, okay, open it up and see if that would make a difference. So like one of the envelopes had $1,000 in it, and they're like, would that make a difference in your business? Well, no, not really, or if they were lower on doing it, yeah, $1,000, I could buy this piece of equipment or that type of thing.
Earlier in their journey.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it was, and then they also had people come in who were further along, like me at this point, and they would have like a discussion, and we could ask them all kinds of questions, kind of like what you've asked me today.
Great. And you just found being around those other people with a similar mindset really helped you take a look at the bigger picture.
Right. Right.
Thanks so much. This has been amazing. Check out swimkidsutah.com if you have questions about signing your kids up for swimming. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Utahpreneur. I have 3 things to tell you, and don't worry, it's going to be quick. Number 1, follow Utahpreneur on whatever socials you like. We're all over at either Utahpreneur or Utahpreneur Pod. It's also in the show notes if you want to link from there. Included in that is a video version of every single podcast where we're actually in person at the location, which is something that makes Utahpreneur unique and quite cool. So definitely check that out. Secondly, if you like this podcast, the best thing you can do is share it with a friend or leave a review, or both. Really appreciate you doing that. And third, if you like this episode, you're definitely going to want to listen to next week's, where I sit down with David Edmonds, the founder and owner of Salt Mine co-working space in Sandy. He's got a ton of really cool insights into Utah's entrepreneurial community because of owning a co-working space, hosting 2 governors there, and having all sorts of businesses host events there. So you definitely want to check that out. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next week.